is Mr. Richard Stockdale, who will speak on the significance of ACA in today's India. Mr. Richard Stockdale is a trustee and board member of Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment, United Kingdom. Richard has spent his entire banking career with Lloyds TSB Bank, formerly as Middle Eastern Regional Head and latterly as CEO of Global Services and India Country Head. Mr. Richard.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to speak to you this morning. And I've been asked to talk about the significance of the ACA in today's India. I'm going to add a word to that, the significance and relevance of the ACA in today's India. Now, as ecstasy, Ambassador Salman Haider mentioned that there are some foreigners on this panel. And I am one of them, I guess, but my first breath was drawn in India. My formative years were drawn in India. And India is, therefore, my spiritual home in many ways. And I have a great love of India and a great commitment to India. Now on to the topic of corruption. Corruption has reached the point in India where it's become a way of life. And that in itself, if we said no more, is something serious to really focus on. In effect, it means that corruption has now reached a point where, in my old banking language and many corporate languages, we are at BAU, business as usual. And if corruption is business as usual, which in many areas, in many ways it is, that is something which is seriously serious. That's not good grammar, Shakespeare would have shuddered. I'll say it again, seriously serious. Now, would it matter if India were the size of a Caribbean country? The answer is logically, yes, it would matter, because corruption should not be present anywhere, but would it matter as much? No, it wouldn't. The reason is quite simple. India is not the size of a Caribbean country. India doesn't have the population of a Caribbean country. India has approximately 1/6 of the global population. That in itself is a ground-quaking statistic. 1/6 of the humanity on this planet is Indian. Presently, 50% of its population is below the age of 25. And all I'm going to do in this presentation, ladies and gentlemen, is to try and point you to statistics and questions, because I believe that if we're going to be committed to this fight against corruption, it has to come from the inside out and not the outside in. Outside in is imposed. Inside out is natural. That means that we have the commitment. So I'm going to take you through some statistics just to try and lead your thinking, and then I'm going to ask some open questions, which are pretty obvious in their answers, but nevertheless their answers need to come from you. I don't need to hear them verbally rather. I need you to have them in your mind. So I'll say it again. 50% of the population of 1/6 of the humanity on this planet is under 25 years old, with their lives and their dreams, their aspirations, their challenges, their victories, their defeats, their experiences of life all ahead of them. By 2020, which is not very long away, 2020 is 1 Olympics away. You can see if we consider this one done and dusted, which hopefully will get done and dusted well. I'm not quite sure it will, but there we are. By 2020, India is projected to be the most populous nation on Earth. And by 2050, this is another rocking statistic, by 2050, statisticians believe that India will have a population of 1.6 billion people. Now that means from the current population of around about 1.25, we're not quite sure, not 1.25 billion, that there will be 35 million people more. Now that's 3 times the population of London. I'm not sure what the population of Mumbai is, but it'd be a very significant multiplier on that. Now, will that suddenly stop in 2050 at 1.6 billion? No, of course it won't. the average life expectancy by then is going to be about 70 years. When I grew up in India, when I was born and brought up in India, life expectancy, although it varied from rural areas to city areas, but generally the average life expectancy in India was just under 30. Now, life expectancy is a difficult statistic because it is, I won't go into the details of that, but under 30 was the official life expectancy rate. It is now, by 2050, it'll be 70. And by 2020, the average age for an Indian would be 29. So therefore, in 2020, with being the largest nation population-wise on Earth, 29 years old, those Indians will not even be halfway through their life because they have a life expectancy of 70. So they have years and years of expectations ahead of them. And what will their heritage be? Those Indians are only halfway through their natural lives. India has to then feed, educate, provide infrastructure for, employ this huge, young, growing population. Every efficiency available to India will need to be harnessed to the task, to be used and exploited, sucked dry in the most efficient manner possible. India will need to be a shining example of efficiency in all it does, and that is just a fact of life. It's not even an arguable, it's not a subjective issue, it's a fact of life. It will have to take every possible advantage, link it together, harness it to the load, and pull. But hold on, now I'm going to ask you some open questions. They're not exactly, you won't pass too many bright Oxbridge qualifications with these questions, they're pretty simple. Does corruption facilitate efficiency? Does corruption fairly spread wealth in an optimum way? Does corruption does corruption encourage the 1.6 billion Indians to work hard and all pull together? Does corruption create the caliber of leader to obtain the optimum output from the 1.6 billion and growing India's population? Does corruption allow optimum respect for the leaders of India and the community of nations? I think the answers to those are all pretty much the same. But they are realistic realities. Again, Shakespeare would shudder. I'll say realistic realities. Achieving the above ideals with efficient feeding, educating, infrastructure provision, that means construction, which is a huge area of corruption, employing all those young, growing populations, efficiently making available to India all their needs and to be used and exploited and sucked dry, all in the common goal of making India a continually powerful member of the community of nations. How are those ideals going to be achieved in the stew of corruption? It would be doable as widening. I mean, can you imagine you're an Olympic swimmer? Your competitor has a nice open swimming pool full of water to race in. You have a swimming pool full of treacle. Who's going to win? Are you going to swim through treacle? Because for your India now, ladies and gentlemen, sitting here, it's going to be an India in 2050 about your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren, your heritage. You've got the time now to do something about it, but only just. The demographies will roll on. They can't be messed with. You can't change the demography. You can't mess with it. The Chinese tried to alter population trends. They got into a terrible mess. It can't be done. Unless you, everyone singly and collectively and quickly overcome corruption, the result will be inevitability. The future of your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will be lessened, but all because you and I didn't get out of the stands onto the track. Because we felt it's too hard. We thought it couldn't be done. No great act in history has been achieved by people thinking it's too hard, it can't be done. And so, I would say to you, this is the real relevance of the ACA in India today. To be the catalyst to make sure we get out the stands onto the track. And I'm going to propose two mantras, not officially, just as my own thinking here. One is walk the talk. We can talk a lot. Walking is more difficult. We have to walk the talk. And the second one is a mantra that corruption is not okay. If we can instill that into the minds of the youth of India and to our own minds and pass it on the generations, that will do a lot for it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.